A billionaire who owned everything except peace stood alone at his son's grave, believing grief was the only thing life had left for him, when he suddenly noticed a poor waitress and a small girl kneeling there in silence. He didn't know them, yet they were praying over the same grave that had broken his heart for years. As the child folded her hands with innocent devotion, something inside him began to shake, because her presence felt familiar in a way that terrified him. Who were they, and why did they care about the boy he had buried? In that quiet cemetery, among cold stone and whispered prayers, a secret from his past was about to rise, one that would shatter his loneliness and change every life connected to that grave forever. The billionaire had visited many places where silence was expensive and carefully designed, but none of them felt as heavy as the quiet that wrapped itself around the graveyard that morning. The sky was overcast, the kind of dull gray that pressed down on the chest and reminded him of all the days he had survived but never truly lived. He had built empires, broken records, and controlled rooms with a single glance, yet the moment his polished shoes touched the damp grass near his son's grave, he felt smaller than he ever had. The stone stood there, cold and unchanging, carved with a name that once laughed, ran, and dreamed. It had been years, but grief did not respect time, and neither did regret. Before the story unfolds further, take a moment and engage with this journey. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that happen when hearts collide in unexpected places, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. He had come early, as he always did, hoping to avoid the stares of caretakers or the whispers of visitors who knew him not as a grieving father, but as a man whose wealth made headlines. Today, however, something was different. As he approached the grave, he noticed two figures already there. A young woman knelt close to the stone, her posture humble, her clothing simple and worn in a way that spoke of long shifts and tired nights. Beside her stood a small girl, no older than 6 or 7, her hands folded tightly, her head bowed with a seriousness that did not belong to someone so young. The sight stopped him cold. This place was sacred to him, private in a way even his mansions were not, and yet here were strangers praying over the most painful part of his life. He remained at a distance, watching as the woman gently guided the child, their movements soft and reverent. There was no performance in their presence, no attempt to be seen. They were there because something inside them demanded it. The billionaire felt an unexpected tightening in his chest, a mixture of confusion and irritation, layered with a deeper emotion he could not name. When they finally rose, the woman wiped the child's hands clean and adjusted her thin jacket, her face calm but marked by exhaustion. The girl glanced at the grave once more, her eyes full of a sadness far too deep for her age, then turned away. As they walked past him, close enough for him to notice the woman's worn shoes and the child's slightly oversized sweater, something inside him stirred. The child looked up at him briefly, her eyes wide and searching, as if she recognized something familiar in his grief. That fleeting look followed him even after they disappeared beyond the trees. He stood alone again, but the grave no longer felt like it belonged only to him. Kneeling slowly, he placed his hand against the cold stone. Memories flooded in without mercy. His son had been full of light, the kind of boy who noticed waiters by name and insisted on helping strangers without asking why. He remembered dismissing those traits as naive, telling himself there would be time later to teach him how the real world worked. Later never came. The accident had taken everything in a single night, leaving behind a fortune that felt like a cruel joke. He stayed longer than usual that day, haunted by the image of the woman and the child. Who were they, and why had they come here? The cemetery logs would tell him if he wanted, and by the time he returned to his car, he already knew he would find out. Control had always been his way of coping, and this time was no different. That afternoon, inside a quiet cafe not far from the cemetery, the same woman moved between tables with practiced efficiency. She was a waitress, balancing plates and smiles with the precision of someone who could not afford mistakes. The child sat in a corner booth, coloring quietly, waiting patiently as if she had learned long ago not to ask for more than she was given. The billionaire sat near the window, unnoticed, watching as the woman worked through the lunch rush without complaint. There was a dignity in her exhaustion that unsettled him. Over the following days, his visits became routine. He learned her schedule without ever speaking to her, observed how she always saved leftovers for her daughter, how she never wasted a single moment. She laughed softly with customers, but carried a heaviness in her eyes that mirrored his own. It was during one of these visits that he noticed something else, something that struck him like a blow. The child wore a small bracelet, faded and cracked, with a charm identical to one he had once given his son. The design was rare, custom-made, something only a handful existed in the world. His breath caught as the realization crept in, slow and terrifying. Questions piled up faster than answers. The past, which he had locked away behind wealth and silence, began pushing back with force. Memories of a young woman from years ago surfaced, a brief connection dismissed as insignificant at the time, someone he had helped financially and then forgotten in the chaos of business and grief. That night, sleep abandoned him completely. He sat alone in his massive home, surrounded by luxury that now felt hollow, staring at old photographs of his son. The boy's kindness, his quiet empathy, suddenly made sense in a way it never had. Now, if the child from the cemetery was who he feared she might be, then the grave he visited was not the only place his son still lived. By the end of the week, fate stopped being patient. The woman collapsed during her shift, exhaustion finally winning its battle. The cafe buzzed with panic as she was helped to a chair, her face pale, her hands trembling. The child rushed to her side, fear etched into every movement. The billionaire stood frozen for a moment, then moved forward without thinking, his authority cutting through the noise as he ensured help arrived. As the ambulance doors closed, something inside him broke open. This was no longer about curiosity or coincidence. This was about responsibility, truth, and a past that refused to stay buried. The grave led him here for a reason, and whatever awaited him next would change every life connected to that stone forever. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and quiet urgency, a familiar environment for people who lived close to the edge of exhaustion and loss. The billionaire sat rigidly in a chair that had likely held hundreds of worried families before him, his expensive coat folded neatly on his lap, as if order could still protect him from chaos. Across the room, the small girl sat alone, her legs dangling from the seat, her hands clenched tightly around the faded bracelet. She did not cry. Instead, she stared at the floor with a stillness that spoke of a childhood shaped by uncertainty. Time stretched cruelly until a nurse finally emerged with news that the woman would recover, but needed rest, real rest, the kind she had not allowed herself in years. Relief washed over him, followed immediately by guilt. He realized then how little it took for a life to unravel when support was absent. The nurse explained that the woman, whose name he finally learned, worked double shifts and rarely slept, driven by the fear of falling behind in a world that offered no mercy to single mothers. The billionaire arranged for a private room without hesitation, a decision that surprised even him. It felt instinctive, as if some unseen hand guided him toward repair. When the woman woke, confusion clouded her face as she took in the sterile surroundings. She noticed him sitting nearby, his posture formal, but his eyes anything but. Recognition flickered briefly, the faint memory of seeing him in the cafe, perhaps, or maybe something deeper she could not yet place. Over the next few days, truths surfaced slowly, like fragments of a long-buried story refusing to stay hidden. Medical forms, emergency contacts, and quiet conversations revealed pieces of a life lived on survival mode. The woman had lost her husband years ago, she said, her voice steady but heavy. He had died young, long before he could know his daughter. The billionaire listened, each word tightening the knot in his chest, because the dates aligned too closely with the night he had lost his son. He requested a paternity test under the guise of legal and medical necessity, though his heart already knew what science would confirm. Waiting for the results felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, the ground beneath him crumbling with every passing hour. When the confirmation arrived, it struck him with a force he was unprepared for. The child was his granddaughter. His son, gone but never erased, lived on through her. Grief and wonder collided violently. He mourned all over again, not just for the son he had buried, but for the years stolen from this child, for the birthdays missed, the guidance never given, the protection he could have offered but did not know he owed. Wealth had given him power over markets and men, but it had failed to give him awareness, and that failure now felt unforgivable. He watched the child carefully after that, noticing how she flinched at raised voices, how she smiled cautiously, as if joy required permission. Yet there was light in her, unmistakable and familiar. She was kind in the same quiet way her father had been, offering her snacks to other children in the waiting room, thanking nurses with solemn sincerity. Each small act pierced him deeper than any accusation ever could. The woman struggled with the truth when it was finally revealed. Shock gave way to anger, then to exhaustion so deep it bordered on numbness. She had carried the weight alone for so long that the idea of help felt like another burden. The billionaire did not defend himself. He did not explain or justify. He simply listened, absorbing every ounce of pain his absence had caused. For the first time in his life, silence was not a strategy, but an act of respect. When they left the hospital, the world felt altered. The billionaire offered support not as a benefactor, but as family, though he understood trust would take time. He arranged a safe home near good schools, access to health care, and space for healing, careful not to overwhelm or control. Every step forward was cautious, intentional, driven not just by guilt alone, but by a growing sense of purpose he had not felt since before his son's death. And yet, despite the comfort and stability beginning to form, something remained unresolved. The child asked to visit the grave again, her request quiet but firm. When they stood there together, the billionaire felt the full circle of loss and love close around him. The stone no longer represented only an ending. It became a beginning, a reminder that life continued in unexpected ways, demanding courage to accept what it offered.
The transformation was not instant, and it was not easy. Healing never is. The billionaire learned quickly that money could open doors, but it could not erase trauma or replace time. The woman took a leave from waitressing, focusing on recovery and rebuilding her strength, while the child adjusted slowly to a world that felt safer but unfamiliar. There were moments of resistance, of fear that stability was temporary, that kindness always came with conditions. The billionaire chose patience over pressure. He attended school meetings quietly, stood at a distance during first milestones, and let trust grow naturally. In the evenings, he sat alone in his study, reflecting on the man he had been and the man he needed to become. For the first time, his success was measured not in profits, but in presence. The grave visits continued, now shared moments of remembrance rather than solitary grief. The child placed flowers carefully, her small hand resting against the stone, as if feeling her father's presence through it. The billionaire stood beside her, no longer crushed by the silence, but strengthened by it. He spoke internally to his son, promising to protect what he had left behind, to honor the kindness he had once dismissed as weakness. Months passed, and the home slowly filled with laughter. Not loud or careless laughter, but gentle, healing sounds that stitched broken spaces together. The woman began to smile more freely, her shoulders no longer constantly tense. She returned to work by choice, not necessity, finding pride and independence without the crushing weight of survival. The child thrived, her confidence blooming as she realized she was no longer alone in the world. One evening, as sunlight filtered softly through the windows, the billionaire understood something profound. Redemption was not about grand gestures or public apologies. It was about showing up, day after day, in quiet ways that mattered. His son had known that instinctively. Now, through his granddaughter, the lesson had finally reached him. As this story draws close to your heart, take a moment to reflect. If this journey of loss, truth, and second chances touched you in any way, please engage with this video, like it, share it, and let us know in the comments how it made you feel. Your interaction helps these stories reach others who may need hope. Before the final moment, we ask one special thing. Please comment below with a single word that represents what this story gave you today, whether it is hope, healing, forgiveness, or love. On the anniversary of his son's passing, the billionaire visited the grave once more, this time holding his granddaughter's hand. The weight was still there, but it no longer crushed him, it anchored him. In that quiet place, surrounded by memories and second chances, he realized that love never truly disappears. It waits patiently for the moment someone is brave enough to let it back in.